Hi, my name is Fran Sisco, and I'm here with my father, who's now Fran, who's transgender and Italian American. And I'm going to be interviewing her about her culture and subculture for my intercultural communication class at Mercy. I have a number of questions I would like to ask you about your two cultures. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Go ahead.
First question has to do with your nationality culture, your Italian culture, and why did your relatives decide to come to the United States?
They decided to come to the United States mainly to improve their lot. They wanted to have a better life. And so they came from Italy, all four of them, into the United States for that reason. Their parents, my grandparents' parents, what usually happened is that the men would come first, make enough money, then call for the women and children to come later. And it was because jobs were more plentiful in this country, there was more education, and it was said that it was the land of opportunity, and the streets were paved with gold. So that's basically why they came.
So that coincides with why did they leave their original country?
Yes, I think they also saw that it had more. There was the potential of having a better future, and there was so many people immigrating to the United States that they wanted to be part of that, and I think that was true, that there was more opportunity in this country, and so they came from Italy, from the southern part of Italy, in an area called Calabria.
I know currently we live in New Rochelle, New York, Westchester, but where did your family, your ancestors and your parents originally settle, and why did they come to settle in that town?
Well, my father's father settled in Westerly, Rhode Island first, and that's where my father was born. And then my father's father met my father's mother in Westerly, and they worked there. And the reason they went there, my grandfather and grandmother on that side, is because there was a quarry that they worked in the mine of that quarry. And then when the quarry ran dry of the stone, that they mined all the stone out of it, they moved into Mount Vernon. My mother's parents came into New Rochelle, and they settled in New Rochelle, and New Rochelle was a growing town and had jobs, and that's why they settled there.
What is your current job, and how does being, I don't think Italian has really much to do with your job necessarily, but maybe it does, but how does your being transgender affect your job? Because I think it would affect your job greatly.
Okay, well, I'm living full-time as a female for 2.5 years now.
You could also, at this point, tell what made you come out 2 years ago. And give the history of how you decided to become transgender.
Okay,
that kind of relates.
For many years, since I was perhaps even younger than a teenager, I would cross-dress. I would dress in women's clothing, sometimes to relieve stress, sometimes to experiment, sometimes because it was a crazy thing to do, or whatever, and sometimes because many times because I really identified more with the female, or what I thought was the female way of life, and I was heavily influenced by my Italian-American upbringing, which was mainly that the men were the leaders of the family and the women were not, especially me being a first-generation American. Actually, my parents were first generation, I was second generation. So, how being transgender affected my job is that it didn't really. You would think it would have, that it would have been a shock and a surprise to many people. But I found that the clients that I have as a financial advisor, I'm a CPA, investment person, and insurance agent, and estate planner, and financial planner, they felt a closeness to me, those clients, that I cared for them. And that didn't really change no matter what gender I am. In fact, what they felt is that by being fully expressed as a female, closer to what my real passion was, is that I was really living out my dream. And they respected that. And so, and that I was open and honest, and that was consistent with other parts of my life where I had been pretty open and honest and forthright about things. And now this was another layer of myself that I showed to them. And so it didn't really have any negative effects. Even when I would go to conferences where I didn't know the people, and especially in the beginning stages when they knew I was transgender, now I may pass as female more than I did in the early stages, I seemed to be fully accepted. My Italian culture, I think also influences my financial work, my financial planning work, because Italians are often very family-oriented, very personable, speak their mind, expressive, and things like that. And that's very important in financial planning, because you really want to help people develop strategies that could improve their life. And you got to get close to them, and they have to trust you. So I think both cultures.
So your clients are pretty much okay with the whole transition?
Yep. Yep. Luckily, that's the case.
We know that not our family, but maybe down the line they spoke Italian, so that's kind of obvious. But I want to know the language of transgender. I want to know the language you speak, the gestures. There has to be some kind of language like transgender people speak among transgender, where they put on this persona to the world.
Well, it's a very good question, Kelly. Language, as far as the words go, the words for a transgender person are pretty much the same words as they are for a non-transgender person. But there is a difference with gesture. Like a transgender person a transgender woman is trying to emulate a female. And of course, not all females use gestures or speak in the same way or that type of thing. But transgender women take on the gestures and ways, maybe even the way of sitting, the way of, adjusting themselves.
The way of improving herself.
Herself, and a number of other things. That is really a language of women that transgender people take on the language of women. And because they're taking it on and it's not innate and it wasn't developed from childhood, it's perhaps a little clumsy. So it looks maybe a little different, or you can spot it differently. Also, some of the body features, like my hands are larger, than many women's hands. So if I'm using my hands in language, I may appear different than a woman was. Also, we transgender women are trying to be more female, but at the same time, we also are male. And some of the way we see things are really a mixture of both male and female. And so our language includes that. A description of whatever we're talking about is a little more, has a more texture than someone who's male or someone who's female, because a transgender woman includes both in their talk.
Good answer. What holidays do you celebrate as Italian? But also, what things do you go to, and what do transgender people do together, and they celebrate being who they are?
Oh, as an Italian American, I celebrate Columbus Day, which is.
But I don't want those are traditional American holidays that everyone celebrates.
Right.
It has to be something unique that you celebrate.
Well, I think Italians celebrate family and family get-together. And eating together. When I was younger, we would, on my father's side, have people over the house several times during the week out of aunts and uncles, and we would always make some great Italian dish and eat together and talk. And my grandfather would always be telling stories at the head of the table. And then on my mother's side, we would meet every Sunday for dinner, aunts and uncles. And my mother had 4 brothers and a sister, and all the children related to that. So there'd be 15 or more people around it, or 20 people around the table having dinner. So that was a ritual, eating together, a family gathering, that type of thing. It's not really a holiday, but that's, I think, part of being an Italian American was that, at least back then.
And why did we give up that tradition?
We shouldn't have given up that tradition. We should make an effort to, and we say that at every wake or funeral when we see these relatives, that we're going to get back together. But as you know, we recently connected with a relative in Atlantic City who looked me up on the internet. We had the same name, Frank.
What was the reason for him
Sisco.
looking us up?
He looked us up because his father passed on. He was trying to connect with his relatives, and he realized that he didn't know many of them. His grandfather and my grandfather are brothers, so it's pretty close, right? Yet we didn't know each other, and we just met.
And you share the same name.
And we share the same name, so we just looked each other up and met. And I think we're going to meet him again. I hope that's the case. So that's on the Italian side. On the transgender side, there are certain celebration days celebrating Stonewall Inn, where we were, Kelly and I, where you and I were just a couple of weeks ago. The Stonewall Inn, where 30 years ago there was a riot in celebration of transgender rights and gay rights and stuff like that. So there are certain days or events that happen, or Transgender Remembrance Day, when certain transgender people had been killed, and there's ways of remembering them. But mostly it's in get-togethers, or going to conferences, or going to events where a number of people get together, like in the Southern Comfort Conference in Atlanta, where up to 700 transgender women get together for a long weekend. Does that answer your question?
What do you do at these seminars? What do you discuss?
We talk about the pros and cons and difficulties of being transgender, and give each other advice. So it could be as simple as how to apply makeup properly, a seminar on that, to something more significant, like trying to develop one's spirituality and seeing how being transgender is another level of getting in touch with one's soul, and also sharing lots of ideas and experiences.
Do you feel that you have the same opportunities for justice as people who stay in their gender? Or as an Italian, I don't know how that relates to Italian, but maybe you have some answers.
Well, nowadays it's not rare to be an Italian American, because Italian Americans have been inculcated into the culture because they've been here for so long. It may be more difficult for, say, Mexican Americans who don't speak English, or for Chinese Americans, or or from certain people from Africa. But for Italian Americans, it's really not, I don't really feel that there's much injustice. There is some talk about they're categorized as being mafia connected and things like that, once in a blue moon.
That's more stereotypical?
Yeah, that's more stereotypical. And as far as transgender goes, I don't feel the brunt of any injustice myself. In fact, I feel that people bend over backwards often to make me feel comfortable. That if there is a line,
do you think
people,
they're trying to make you feel comfortable, or they're feeling pity or sympathy or sorry for you? Which is not, you don't want them to feel sorry and sympathy and pity.
No, some of it's curiosity. Some of it is maybe some of it, some might think it's sympathy or pity, but I think what it really is just people reaching out to someone who's different. And I think that's part of also being transgender, is a desire to be different. You know, if I'm honest about that, I think there are a number of causes, and it's not just a genetic thing. A lot of it is cultural. And I think the Italian-American upbringing, when I grew up, back then, was very macho. And I think I rebelled against that to some extent. And I got to identify more with women. And I think that's the case nowadays in certain Hispanic cultures, and maybe even some certain Asian cultures. So I don't feel that, although many others do, and there's legislation pending called Genda, Genda, which is to eliminate some of those injustices and discrimination.
The specific injustice that I would like to ask you about, that I don't know if you covered: employment, education, food, shelter, clothing, healthcare. Those are some of the more deeper things I don't think you mentioned.
All right, well, let's take healthcare as an example. Many companies will pay, and insurance companies will pay for a transgender woman to get a gender reassignment surgical operation where her penis is replaced with a vagina, basically. And you know, that's an example in healthcare where it's that advanced, it's that liberal right now, that many companies and the federal government and some state governments are allowing insurance companies to reimburse or pay for that. But in some cases, with some insurance companies, if a person is a transsexual or a transgender, they feel like there maybe are additional risks. Fewer and far between. They're getting to see that there really aren't, and maybe even someone who's transgender is more together, being fully expressed, than if that person had lived a life where they were bottled up and didn't transition. So beside healthcare,
how about in the workplace?
In the workplace, I think you could find a number of companies, a number of individuals within those companies who would say that there's discrimination, and I'm sure that there is. But it's
you said before,
it's usual to have not harassment, but there's usual a feeling of discomfort when anyone is different. Take somebody who has
didn't you tell me once that you can't
body.
Be fired for your race, but you can be fired for being transgender?
You can't be fired for your race or religion or your color, right? And you can't be fired for your sexuality, like if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual. But you can be fired if you're transgender or if you express as the opposite. And there's legislation to remove that discrimination. But it's unusual now, especially because gay rights, LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights have advanced so far, and people are embracing it, including Pope Francis, who recently came out in support of including gays in the family of people and reaching out and loving them as well, and not being hung up with dogma or doctrine.
Great. What movies or TV shows symbolize your subculture and culture?
Well, the biggest movie was Some Like It Hot, I think, back in the 50s.
For transgender.
For transgender. Or actually cross-dressing. Because they, I don't think, really wanted to be female, but they used dressing as women to get away from the bad guys in that movie. And it was Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. They were two real men, you know, good-looking, respected actors at the time. And they dressed up as females, so, and they looked pretty good, and that was probably broke the ice on it. And then there was Birdcage and Kaja Foal, some of the other movies. Paris is Burning is another movie. Priscilla goes across the desert, which they made a musical out of. Kinky Boots, more recent one. There's a show called on television. Actually, I haven't seen it. I've read about it, called Orange is the New Black. It's about women in prison and includes a transgender woman. And she's a very good actress. And
there was a TV show on about a guy who was straight, who can't get a job. He has a family, doesn't tell his daughter or his kids or his wife that he's going to work during the day as a female because there's more female jobs out there. And that show lasted not even a season and it bombed. Why do you think it bombed so much?
I don't know why it bombed. I was hoping that it would be a success because I think it was a pretty good premise. It was a good way that they put the show over. I think the acting was good.
I personally don't think it was hateful or perceived anyone in a bad light, but maybe other people did.
You know what? They got criticism because the critics said that it portrayed, it minimalized or made fun of being gay. And it really didn't at all, I don't think. I think they were overly sensitive to critics, and the network didn't want to put up with any bad press about that, and didn't want to
They just took it off.
Yeah, they just took it off. I think if the public relations went a different way, it could have been a big success. You could imagine a show like Two Broke Girls, that instead of being about two broke girls, it was about two broke transgender.
It'd be hilarious.
Right? It probably would be. So they are very funny, and as you know, Kelly, I've been doing stand-up comedy, and there's a lot of funny material in being transgender and trying to navigate between being a male and being a female, and that has come out in many movies and many
What movies
shows.
On the Italian side would you recommend?
I think my favorite Italian movie, I can't remember the fella's name, he won an Oscar for it, was Life is Beautiful, which was set in Italy and was about Nazis who were occupying Italy, and one of the Italians had a young son that he hid away, a stowaway, in the camp. And it was a very funny movie, very touching, and sad with that context of Nazis taking over Germany. But anyway, that was an excellent movie. There were Divorce Italian Style with Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni is another one that comes to mind. More movies with Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, like That's Amore.
Didn't you say Cinema Paradiso?
Cinema Paradiso was an excellent movie about a small Italian movie theater that a man owned, and he was bucking technology that wanted to basically take it down, and why he wanted to keep up showing the movies. Italians, there are many famous Italian actors and actresses, and
so I take away a lot from this. What do you take away? What do you gain from having these two worlds and living as these two worlds? What are your conclusions?
Well,
what do you
I
take
think
away
they do intersect, and it was your asking me to do this interview that got me to think about it. I think they intersect in a couple of ways. One I had mentioned was that growing up as an Italian American in my generation was it was a very male thing. Men were the leaders of the family. Women were not as well educated. They didn't have the jobs weren't as good. They weren't felt to be as smart, and of course they are. And I felt that some of my inclination to be transgender was maybe as a result of that. Secondly, is being an Italian American, Italians have a long history of being interested in the arts and being very good at the arts, like Michelangelo and Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci on the very creative inventing end, and it goes, and the list goes on and on and on. And musically, all the many of the operas, much of music from the 50s, like a Sinatra, you know, a lot of the entertainment world. Italian Americans are very gifted artists, I think. And some of that comes from 2,000 years of culture before that. So I think those two things, a desire to be artistic, creative, and perhaps set myself apart and be different, and artists often push the envelope and do things a little bit different. I think that had an effect on me wanting to be transgender, because that's like the ultimate statement of being different, perhaps. It's sort of like, instead of getting a tattoo, changing your gender, it's like a bigger tattoo.
That's wonderful. Thank you for your interview, and thank you for your time. I've learned a lot from you.
And I want to thank you, Kelly.
Very interesting. Thank you, Dad, for your time, and I love you very, very much.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you so much for being not only tolerant, but you've made my transition a lot easier. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye.